He slapped my graduation cake right off the table. Frosting exploded across the patio, candles rolling under people's shoes while everyone stared for half a second, then burst out laughing. My 10-year-old nephew grinned up at me and said, "Come on, Aunt Jenna, eat it off the ground." The whole table roared. My mother laughed the hardest. I stood there with the cake knife still in my hand, trying to understand how people who said they loved me could sound that cruel. I didn't argue. I didn't scold him. I just set the knife down, untied the thin party apron, and walked away while their laughter followed me across the deck and out into the dark yard. By the time I reached my car at the curb, my hands were shaking, but there were no tears, just a quiet, sharp certainty in my chest that something was over. I drove out of that Idaho subdivision without saying goodbye. Halfway back to Seattle, the highway was almost empty, just my headlights cutting through the dark and the occasional pair of taillights far ahead. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. In my head I kept hearing it on a loop, my mother's amused voice floating over the smashed cake. "Oh, come on, Jenna. Don't be so sensitive." As if it were a joke. As if I were the problem. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot in Seattle, it was well past midnight. Rain streaked down the windshield in fine, slanting lines. The building windows glowed soft yellow against the night. I let myself in, dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and just stood in the silence. For a few seconds it felt like the whole day might finally fall off my shoulders. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. For one moment, I actually let myself hope it might be an apology, or at least a weak attempt at one. I opened it. "We've decided to cut all contact. Stay away from us for good." A few seconds later, a tiny red heart appeared under it. My sister had liked the message. I stared at the screen. My reflection hovered faintly over the words, eyes tired, mascara smudged. My chest didn't clench. My throat didn't burn. It was like my body had finally stopped trying to prove it still cared. Instead of answering, I opened my laptop. The blue light washed across my tiny kitchen. My budgeting spreadsheet popped open automatically, the one I updated every month like clockwork. 2 lines near the top stood out in bold. Parents' mortgage, $1,400, auto debit. Sister's SUV, $640, auto debit. Both loans co-signed by me. Both payments drafted from my account on the first of every month for the last 3 years. I had signed those papers at their kitchen table while my mother said things like, "You're the responsible one, honey. Just help the family for a little while. You know we'd do the same for you." Back then I believed her. Back then it felt like love. Now, looking at those numbers, it didn't feel like love. It looked like a leash. Rain tapped harder against the glass, uneven and insistent, like a clock running out of patience. I scrolled through old messages while the sound filled the room. Polite thank yous. Guilt-soaked reminders. Excuses. "Just until your dad's back on his feet. Just until your sister's business takes off. We'll take over payments next month." Next month never arrived. It just kept getting pushed forward like a mirage. Something in my chest shifted. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was clarity. I opened a new text to the family group chat, fingers moving slowly, deliberately. "I'm removing my name from every loan tomorrow." No emojis. No explanations. No softening. I hit send. The tiny notification popped up. Delivered. I set the phone face down on the table and just listened. The rain softened, as if it had gotten whatever it wanted to say out of its system. I poured a glass of water and watched the condensation slide down the side of the glass. For the first time in my life, the quiet didn't feel like surrender. It felt like control. They wanted me out of their lives, fine. But this time, they were going to feel what it meant for me to be gone, not just emotionally, but financially, practically. They had lost their favorite safety net. Morning came pale and gray, the kind of Seattle light that makes everything look slightly washed out and honest. I brewed coffee and wrapped my hands around the mug, watching the steam rise in slow spirals. It was strange how something as big as the end of a family could be triggered by such small things, a cake on the ground, a text message, a quiet decision at a kitchen table. I hadn't slept, but I felt wide awake. The exhaustion had burned away and left something clearer behind. By 9 a.m., my phone started vibrating across the counter like it was possessed. Over and over, Mom, Dad, my sister, random numbers from Idaho I didn't recognize but knew were cousins or family friends. Missed calls stacked up. The group chat turned into a firestorm. "You've gone too far. Do you have any idea what you're doing to us? After everything we've done for you. We raised you." Not one message said, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. I pulled on a gray sweater, twisted my hair into a low knot, and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys for a second, then I typed what I already knew I was going to type. Green First Bank, Downtown Seattle Branch, appointments. 2 hours later, I sat across from a man named Mr. Diaz in a small consultation office with pale blue walls and a lonely fern on a metal shelf. He looked to be in his 50s, with kind, tired eyes behind thin glasses, the kind of face that had seen this exact situation too many times. "Miss Hart," he said, pronouncing my last name carefully as he shook my hand. "I went through the documents you uploaded last night. I think I have a pretty clear picture." I folded my hands in my lap to hide the tremor. "I co-signed 2 loans," I said. "One for my parents' house, one for my sister's SUV. I've been making the payments for years. I don't live there. I don't drive the car. I just want off everything." He nodded slowly, expression softening. "You're not the first person I've seen that happen to," he said. "People lean on the word family until it stops meaning love and starts meaning free labor and unlimited credit. He slid a stack of papers across the desk toward me. "If you can show you don't have any ownership in the property or the vehicle, we can start a co-borrower release. We can also freeze any joint access tied to your name." I opened the folder I had brought. Lease agreement for my Seattle apartment. Pay stubs. Email threads where my mother wrote things like, "The house is ours, you just helped sign," and, "The SUV is Amanda's, obviously, you just made it possible." He read quietly for a few minutes, flipping pages, occasionally nodding. Then he looked up. "This is enough," he said. "We can move forward." He picked up his desk phone, called someone in legal, and spoke in calm, precise phrases. "I need co-borrower removal started on 2 accounts for a Jenna Hart." "Yes." "Effective immediately." The tiny click of his pen when he hung up sounded small in that quiet room, but to me it felt like a fault line breaking. He turned the first form around and handed me a pen. "Sign here," he said. "And here. And here." My hand shook a little, but each signature felt like snipping another invisible thread that had been wrapped around my throat for years. When he stamped the last page, the dull thud echoed off the walls. "You did the right thing," he said gently. "Sometimes the only way to teach people how to treat you is to stop letting them treat you badly." Outside, the wind cut cold across my face, but my chest felt lighter than it had in a very long time. On the corner, I ducked into a tiny cafe. The barista slid a cappuccino across the counter and smiled. "Have a good day." I met her eyes and said something I hadn't been able to say and actually mean in years. "I will." That night, as pasta water bubbled on the stove in my small kitchen, my phone lit up again. The family group chat glowed bright at the top of the screen. "How could you do this to us? You ruined our credit. You're heartless. You'll regret this." I typed one sentence back. "I just stopped paying for people who laughed when my cake hit the ground." Then I set the phone down. The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It felt like freedom settling in. 3 days passed before the banging started. Not a polite knock, not a hesitant tap, but a furious, pounding fist that rattled the frame of my Seattle apartment door hard enough to shake the picture on the wall beside it. I froze mid-step, pasta spoon still in my hand, steam curling from the pot behind me. My stomach dropped before I even checked the intercom screen. I already knew. Some part of me had known. This moment was coming the second I sent that text. I tapped the screen. There they were, my mother and Amanda. 2 faces I'd known all my life, now twisted with anger in a way I'd never seen before. Mom's lips were pressed so tight they almost disappeared. Amanda looked wild-eyed, her mascara smeared, her hair frizzing around her face like static. "Jenna," my mother's voice screeched through the door. "Open this door right now. We need to talk." I didn't move. Amanda stepped forward, practically shaking. "What did you do with the bank?" "Mom's accounts are frozen. My car might get repossessed. You ruined everything." Their voices kept rising, bouncing down the hallway. I could hear neighbors' doors cracking open, curious eyes peeking out. My hand trembled, not with fear, but with something sharper. Recognition. This was who they were when the person they controlled stopped letting them. I took one slow breath, tapped my phone screen, and opened the 911 app. The automated voice asked for the nature of the emergency. "There are 2 individuals outside my apartment refusing to leave," I whispered evenly. "They're yelling, attempting to force a confrontation. I want to report trespassing." The dispatcher asked, "Do you know them?" I watched my mother slam her palm against the door. "Yes," I said quietly, "but today they're just people violating my boundary." Outside, Amanda's voice turned shrill. "You're destroying this family. You think cutting us off makes you strong? You're selfish. You're heartless. You're. 10 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed across the walls. 2 police officers came into view of the intercom, 1 man, 1 woman, both calm and steady. I watched as my mother rushed toward them, hands flying, her voice frantic and shaking. She's my daughter. She ruined our finances. We just want to talk to her. The male officer raised a hand gently. Ma'am, this is private property. If she asked you to leave, you need to leave. She's my child, my mother shouted, face red. I have rights. The officer shook his head. You have rights as a parent, but not the right to trespass on an adult's residence. You need to step back. Amanda's face crumpled as she backed away, shoulders shaking with angry, helpless tears. Through the intercom speaker, I finally spoke. Not loud, not shaking, just steady. If they act like intruders, then they will be treated like intruders. The officer heard me and gave the camera a small nod of acknowledgement. Then he gestured toward the stairs. This conversation is over. Let's go. Now. My mother turned back to the door, eyes blazing with betrayal. You'll regret this, Jenna. Blood doesn't disappear just because you say so. I didn't respond. I didn't open the door. They left under the dull glow of police lights. Their footsteps echoed on the stairwell, heavy, defeated, fading into nothing. When the silence returned, it felt like warm air rushing into a room that had been sealed shut for years. I slid down the wall to the floor, my breath shaking, not from fear, but from release. My phone was still recording, capturing everything, the yelling, the threats, the officers' voices. I saved the file. Labeled it, Boundaries. April 17, 2025, ***. That night, Seattle glowed outside my window. Cars glided down the wet streets. People laughed on the sidewalk. Life kept moving. And in my small 4th-floor apartment, a 29-year-old woman finally realized she didn't owe her family her peace. They had taken enough. The next morning, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in years, quiet that didn't hurt, quiet that felt earned. But peace never lasts long when dysfunction loses its favorite target. By noon, my phone was buzzing again, this time with something even worse. By noon, the buzzing became constant. Not the frantic calls from last night, not the angry voicemails. Something colder. Notifications, one after another. A drip, then a stream, then a flood. I opened Facebook, and my stomach dropped. Pinned at the top of my mother's profile, written in bold, dramatic letters, sometimes the child you trust most betrays you the worst. Daisy stole from her parents and destroyed our credit. Some people never learn gratitude. Hundreds of comments. Neighbors. Relatives. Church women who used to pinch my cheeks when I was 8. How awful. Poor Linda. You raised her better. Some kids forget who fed them. And then one comment that made my skin prickle. A neighbor from when I was 12, I heard she used her parents' savings to buy that Seattle apartment. A lie so bold it would have been funny if it didn't land like a punch. My throat tightened but I didn't panic. The old me would have. I would have typed long explanations. I would have begged people to believe me. I would have apologized for things I didn't even do. But now, I just breathed. Let them talk. Let them choke on their own imagination. Their fire couldn't burn me anymore. Instead, I opened my work email. Typed a short, clean message to my team. Subject, clarification. Personal matter. Hi team, if you see rumors online, please ignore them. Some people fight boundaries with lies. I'm fine and appreciate your professionalism and privacy. Daisy. I hit send. Closed the laptop. The truth doesn't need shouting. It only needs time. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at my office. Cream-colored, thick paper. A gold-embossed seal at the bottom corner. Green First Bank. My pulse kicked as I opened it. Inside, one crisp document. This letter confirms that Miss Daisy Wilson has been fully released from all liabilities concerning the jointly signed mortgage and vehicle loan under the names of Linda and Amanda Wilson. The bank's official seal shimmered under the fluorescent lights. My signature glowed at the bottom. Final. Irrevocable. Mine. I traced the embossed edge with my thumb. Not revenge. Not victory. Just justice. Quiet, clean justice. That evening, my mother's Facebook post vanished. Deleted. No explanation. No apology. Just gone, as if it had never existed. Maybe someone told her the truth. Maybe the bank called. Maybe the shame finally got heavy enough. I didn't care. I wasn't watching anymore. But my phone buzzed one last time. A number I hadn't saved. Probably never would. You'll pay for this, Daisy. You think you've won? I stared at the message. Then something strange happened. I smiled, not a mocking smile, not a bitter one. Just, light. Almost peaceful, because winning wasn't what I wanted. Freedom was. That night I stood by my window, Seattle glittering beneath me, the skyline stretching like a promise. Coffee and rain scented the air drifting in from the cracked window. For the first time in my life, I felt unchained. I wasn't the strong one holding everyone together. I wasn't the scapegoat or the wallet or the quiet one in the corner. I was just Daisy, whole, free, mine. Weeks passed. The noise faded. The guilt dissolved. No more late-night calls. No more screaming. No more lies. Silence had finally become something beautiful, something healing. I focused on my work at Green Pulse Tech, led a project. Earned a quiet promotion. During a meeting, our CEO, Lydia, looked straight at me and said, "Daisy, you lead with steadiness. People trust that." It was the first time anyone had described my strength without turning it into a burden. At home, my life became soft again. Sunrise yoga, soup simmering on the stove, laughter with friends who saw me, really saw me. One weekend, Marcus teased me about the cactus on my windowsill, saying, "It looks like me." Calm, but don't touch it. I laughed, really laughed, and the sound didn't feel borrowed. It felt like mine. And then, one morning, a photo appeared in my inbox from Mr. Diaz. My release document, framed, hanging in the bank's compliance office. "We use this as an example of boundary protection," his message read. I stared at it, warmth filling my chest. I'd spent so many years being someone's safety net, someone's solution, someone's silence. Now, I was just Daisy, whole, free, finally belonging to myself. A year later, my phone lit up. A single message from Amanda. "I'm sorry for everything." No excuses. No manipulation. Just 6 quiet words. I stared at the message for a moment. Then gently set my phone down. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reopening the door. Sometimes it means closing it softly and keeping your peace. Outside, Lake Union shimmered under the evening light, calm, wide, endless. I took a deep breath, the air cool and alive. "Welcome home, Daisy," I whispered to myself. If you've ever had to cut ties to find yourself again, you're not alone.